In the largest adoption station in the galaxy, families from 1,000 worlds walked past one small chair. A glowing screen above it kept changing numbers. 12 rejections, 203 rejections, 742 rejections, until the number reached something no one had ever seen before. 1,000 families. All said no. No one touched her form. No one even asked her name, because the rumors said something terrifying. They said a single child from her species once destroyed an entire fleet. So the little alien girl simply sat there, waiting, not crying, not begging, just holding a broken toy starship in her hands. Then, something unexpected happened. A human from Earth stopped walking. He looked at the number, 1,000 rejections. And instead of walking away like everyone else, he asked one quiet question. Oh, why does nobody want her? The entire station suddenly went silent, because the truth behind that question was something the galaxy had tried to hide for centuries. Before we uncover that secret, welcome to Cosmic Neon Aliens, a place where the strangest stories of the universe begin. And if you're listening right now, maybe sitting with a cup of tea like a wise traveler of life, do us one small favor. Gently press that subscribe button so you never miss the next story drifting through the stars. And tell us something in the comments. From which planet or country on Earth are you watching tonight? The adoption hall on Orion Station was louder than usual that day. Families from many different planets had arrived to find children to take home. Tall blue aliens from Vega walked past green-scaled traders from Draco. A tall, insect-like family waited in line near the entrance, and several humans from Earth were speaking quietly with station officials. Above the center of the hall, a giant glowing board showed the names of children waiting to be adopted. Next to every name was a number showing how many families had visited them. Most numbers were small, 5 visits, 10 visits, maybe 20. But in one quiet corner of the hall, far from the bright lights and happy voices, there was a chair that nobody wanted to approach. On that chair sat a small alien girl. Her skin was silver like soft metal. Her eyes glowed faint blue, like tiny stars in the dark, and she held a small broken toy starship in both hands. She did not move much. She did not speak. She simply watched families walk past. Above her chair, the glowing board showed a number that made people uncomfortable. Rejections, 1,000. Every time a new family walked close to her corner, they would look at the number, then they would look at the girl, and slowly they would step back. Some whispered to each other. "That is the Aelari child," one alien said quietly. Another family shook their heads. "No one should take that risk," they replied. A tall official from the station stood nearby, watching carefully. His job was to help families find children, but he never invited anyone toward the silver girl. He only waited for them to walk away, and they always did. A small reptilian child once pointed at the girl and asked his parents, "Why is she alone?" His mother quickly pulled him away. "Because some children bring danger," she whispered. The silver girl heard every word, but her face did not change. She only looked down at the broken toy starship in her hands. The toy had one missing wing. She gently touched the broken edge like it was something very precious. Hours passed. Families came and left. Laughter filled the bright center of the hall, but the quiet corner stayed the same. No footsteps stopped there. No voices greeted her, and the number above her chair never changed, $1,000. Even the station workers tried not to look at the girl. Everyone in the galaxy knew the story. The Aelari species once had strange powers connected to energy and stars. Long ago, a terrible war happened, ships exploded, worlds burned, and many civilizations blamed the Aelari. After that war, the survivors of the species slowly disappeared. Some believed they went extinct. Others believed they were hiding somewhere in deep space, but the fear never disappeared. Now one small Aelari child sat quietly in an adoption hall, and no one wanted to bring that fear into their home. The girl slowly lifted her eyes toward the glowing board, while the number flickered again as another family recorded their decision. The system made a soft sound, 1,001 rejections. The girl looked at the new number for a long moment, then she returned her attention to the broken toy starship, as if numbers no longer mattered. Across the hall, a new visitor had just entered the station. He was human, not very tall, wearing a simple dark jacket used by many travelers from Earth. His name was Daniel Carter, and this was his first time visiting Orion's station. Daniel had come to the adoption hall for a simple reason. He believed every child deserved a home, but as he walked through the busy hall, something strange caught his attention. People kept glancing toward the same quiet corner, then quickly looking away. Daniel followed their eyes. At first, he only saw the empty space around the chair. Then he noticed the girl sitting there, and above her, the number glowing on the board. 1,001 rejections. Daniel stopped walking. He stared at the number, then he looked at the small girl holding the broken toy ship. She did not look dangerous. She looked Lonely? A nearby official noticed Daniel staring and quickly approached him. "Sir, you may want to look at other children in the hall," the official said politely. "There are many excellent options today." Daniel did not move. He kept looking at the quiet corner. "Why is she sitting alone?" Daniel asked. The official's face tightened. "It is better if you do not get involved," he replied quietly. Daniel turned his head slowly. "But I asked a simple question," he said. The official hesitated for a moment. Then he spoke in a lower voice. "That child is Elari." Daniel looked back at the girl again. She was still holding the broken toy starship, still silent, still alone. Daniel took one step toward the quiet corner, then another. Behind him, several station workers suddenly became nervous, because no one had ever walked toward that chair before, and the little silver girl slowly looked up. For the first time that day, someone was actually coming to speak with her. The adoption hall slowly became quieter as the human walked toward the silver girl. Some families noticed what he was doing. A few stopped talking. Others watched with nervous curiosity, because no one in the entire station had ever chosen to approach that chair before. The glowing board above the girl continued to shine with the number everyone feared. 1-to-1 rejections. The little alien girl lifted her glowing blue eyes as the human stopped in front of her. She looked surprised, almost confused. For a moment she said nothing. She only studied the stranger standing there. The human knelt slightly so he would not look so tall and frightening. His voice was calm. "Hello there," he said gently. "My name is Daniel." The girl looked down at the broken toy starship in her hands. Then she spoke very quietly. "Are you here to reject me too?" Her voice sounded tired, like someone who had already heard the answer many times before. Daniel frowned slightly. "No," he said. "I came to ask why nobody wants you." Around the hall, several station workers exchanged worried looks. One of them quickly walked toward Daniel. It was the same adoption official from earlier. His expression was serious now. "Sir, we should speak privately," the official said. Daniel stood up slowly, but he did not move away from the girl. "You can say it here," Daniel replied calmly. The official looked around the hall to make sure no children were listening too closely. Then he lowered his voice. "That child belongs to the Elari species," he explained. Daniel nodded slowly. "I heard that already." The official sighed. "But you do not understand what that means," he said. "The Elari are one of the most feared species in galactic history." Several nearby aliens were now openly watching the conversation. The official continued carefully. "Centuries ago, the Elari could control powerful forms of cosmic energy. They could draw power from stars, storms, and deep space itself. At first, other civilizations believed they were guardians of the galaxy, but everything changed during the War of Burning Skies." Daniel crossed his arms slightly. "What happened?" he asked. The official hesitated before answering. "Entire fleets were destroyed in seconds," he said. "Planets were left with dead energy fields, and many survivors claim they saw Elari standing at the center of those disasters." The hall felt colder as he spoke. After the war, most governments declared the Elari too dangerous to exist. They disappeared soon after. Some believe they were hunted. Others believe they simply vanished into deep space. Daniel slowly looked back toward the little girl sitting in the chair. She was quietly listening to every word, still holding the broken toy ship in her small hands. "And now you have one of the last survivors sitting alone in an adoption hall," Daniel said softly. The official nodded. "That is correct. Many families came to look at her, but when they learned her species," he glanced at the glowing number above the chair, "they always changed their minds." Daniel stared at the number again. 1001. Rejections. Then he asked another question. "How old is she?" "Approximately 8 cycles," the official answered. "Very young by most galactic standards." Daniel looked surprised. "She is just a child." "Yes," the official said. "But her species developed abilities very early. That is why no one is willing to take responsibility for her." At that moment, the little alien girl finally spoke again. "You do not have to whisper," she said quietly. "I already know what they think." Daniel turned toward her. Her glowing blue eyes looked calm, but behind them was something deeper, something lonely. "They think I am dangerous," she continued softly. "They think I will hurt people like the others did." Daniel slowly walked back toward the chair and sat down beside her. Several aliens across the hall gasped quietly. The official looked extremely uncomfortable now. "Sir, that is not recommended," he warned. Daniel ignored him. Instead, he looked at the broken toy starship in the girl's hands. "What happened to your ship?" he asked. The girl examined the toy for a moment. "It was already broken when they gave it to me," she replied, "but I like it anyway." Daniel smiled a little. "Why?" he asked. The girl lifted the toy slightly toward the bright ceiling lights. Because even broken ships can still dream about flying, she said. The word surprised Daniel. For someone so young, she sounded wiser than many adults. Across the hall, the adoption official suddenly spoke again. Sir, there is something else you must understand. Daniel looked up. What is it? The official hesitated. Then he said the sentence that made the entire room uneasy. No one truly knows how powerful an Ilari child can become. Some scientists believe their abilities grow stronger when they feel strong emotions. Fear, anger, loneliness. Daniel slowly looked back at the girl beside him. She was still sitting quietly, still holding the broken toy ship. But now Daniel noticed something new. The faint blue glow in her eyes had grown a little brighter, and for a brief moment, the lights above the quiet corner flickered slightly. For a brief moment after the lights flickered, the entire adoption hall felt strangely quiet. Several families stepped a little farther away from the silver girl. A few whispered nervously. Did you see that? One alien murmured. The lights changed when she looked up. Another replied softly. The station official quickly tapped his wrist console and checked the power readings. Everything looked normal, but the uneasy feeling in the room did not disappear. Daniel Carter noticed the whispers, but he did not move away. Instead, he stayed seated beside the girl. The small, broken toy starship still rested carefully in her hands. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel gently asked another question. What is your name? The girl hesitated. It looked like she was not used to answering that question. Finally, she said quietly, My name is Lyra. Daniel smiled slightly. That is a beautiful name. Lyra looked confused by the compliment. Most visitors never stayed long enough to learn her name. Many did not even speak to her at all. Daniel leaned back slightly in the chair beside her. Well, Lyra, he said calmly, I think we should talk about something important. Lyra looked up at him carefully. What? She asked. Daniel pointed gently toward the glowing board above them. Why does everyone believe you are dangerous? Lyra looked at the number above her chair. The number had stopped changing for now, 1001 rejections. Her glowing blue eyes reflected the bright digits. For a moment she seemed unsure if she should answer. Then she slowly spoke. Because of stories. Daniel tilted his head slightly. What kind of stories? Lyra lowered her eyes again and traced the broken wing of her toy ship with one finger. The kind adults tell each other when they are afraid, she said. Daniel listened carefully. Across the hall, several aliens were pretending not to watch them, but their attention was clearly focused on the quiet corner. Lyra continued softly. Long ago, my people helped many worlds. We could feel energy in the stars. We could guide storms away from planets. And we could stop dangerous space waves before they destroyed ships. Daniel raised his eyebrows with interest. That sounds like a very useful ability. Lyra nodded slowly. It was. But during the War of Burning Skies, something terrible happened. Daniel leaned forward slightly. What happened? Lyra shook her head. That part of the story always changes, she explained. Different planets tell different versions. Some say my people attacked first. Some say we lost control of our power. And some say the war was not even our fault. Daniel crossed his arms thoughtfully. So no one really knows the truth? Lyra looked up again. My mother knew the truth, she said quietly. Daniel felt a small pause in the air after those words. Where is your mother now? He asked gently. Lyra looked down again. She is gone. The answer was simple, but the sadness inside it was clear. Daniel did not push the question further. Instead, he pointed again at the glowing number. Then why are you here alone? Lyra took a deep breath. The rescue ships found me after my home station was destroyed, she explained. They brought me here so someone could take care of me. Daniel looked around the busy adoption hall. That was a good idea, he said. Lyra gave a small, uncertain shrug. Maybe. Daniel noticed something strange in her voice. You do not sound very hopeful, he said. Lyra studied the glowing number again. When the first families came, they smiled at me, she explained. They asked my name and talked about my home world. But when the officials told them what species I am, she slowly looked back at Daniel. They always left. Daniel nodded quietly. He had already seen how quickly fear spread in the hall. But you never tried to hide your species, he asked. Lyra shook her head immediately. My mother told me never to hide what I am, she replied. She said truth is stronger than fear. Daniel smiled softly. That sounds like wise advice. Lyra tilted her head slightly. You are not afraid of me, she said. It was not a question. It sounded more like a quiet observation. Daniel thought for a moment before answering. Fear usually comes from not understanding something, he said. So I prefer to ask questions first. Lyra looked at him carefully. No one in the hall had said anything like that before. After a few seconds, she asked something in return. Why did you stop walking? Daniel chuckled a little. Because I saw the number above your chair, he explained. Lyra followed his eyes up to the glowing digits again. Hey, yes, she said softly. Most people only see that number. Daniel shook his head slightly. I saw something else. Lyra looked curious. What did you see? Daniel pointed toward the broken toy starship she was holding. A kid who still believes broken ships can fly, he answered. For the first time since he arrived, Lyra looked slightly surprised. No one had noticed the toy before, or cared enough to ask about it. Daniel leaned forward again. So, now I want to know something important, he said. Lyra waited quietly. What is it? She asked. Daniel looked directly into her glowing blue eyes and asked the question no one in the galaxy had bothered to ask before. What really happened to your people? The question hung quietly in the air between them. For the first time since Daniel arrived, Lyra did not answer immediately. Her glowing blue eyes slowly moved across the busy adoption hall. Families were still watching from a distance. Some whispered, some looked nervous, but none of them came closer. Lyra finally looked back at Daniel. You really want to know? She asked softly. Daniel nodded. Yes. Lyra studied his face carefully. Most adults ask questions only to confirm their fears. But Daniel's voice sounded different. It sounded curious, not afraid. Lyra slowly placed the broken toy starship beside her on the chair. Then she spoke. The truth is not the same story people tell. Daniel leaned forward slightly. I expected that, he replied calmly. Lyra continued. My people were not soldiers. We were star listeners. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Star listeners, he repeated. Lyra nodded. Yes. Our species could feel energy moving through space. We could sense dangerous waves before machines detected them, and we could guide energy away from planets that were in danger. Daniel thought about this for a moment. So, your people protected other worlds? Yes, Lyra said quietly. For many centuries, we helped many civilizations. But the galaxy slowly became afraid of our abilities. Daniel crossed his arms. Why would they fear people who helped them? Lyra's expression became sad. Because power always makes someone nervous, she replied. And powerful people are often misunderstood. Daniel could not argue with that. He had seen similar things even on Earth, Lyra continued. And then one day, something happened near the edge of the galaxy. Daniel listened carefully. There was a massive energy storm, she explained. Bigger than anything recorded before. It was moving toward several populated systems. Daniel nodded slowly. So your people tried to stop it? Lyra looked down. Yes. But the storm was too powerful. Daniel waited. What happened next? He asked. Lyra's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. No one knows exactly, she said. Some say the storm exploded when my people tried to control it. Some say another fleet attacked during the operation. And some say someone wanted the disaster to happen. Daniel frowned slightly. You mean someone caused the accident on purpose? Lyra shrugged gently, and my mother believed that. Daniel leaned back in his chair. That would explain why the stories are so different, he said. Lyra nodded. After the explosion, many fleets were destroyed. Entire sectors lost power for weeks. And my people were blamed for everything. Daniel sighed quietly. Fear spreads faster than truth. Yes, Lyra replied softly. Soon, every government decided the same thing. What was that? Daniel asked. Lyra's voice became quieter. That the Ailari were too dangerous to exist? Daniel felt a heavy silence fill the corner of the hall. Across the room, a few aliens were still watching nervously. Lyra continued speaking. My people began disappearing. Some escaped into deep space. Some hid on remote stations. And some were hunted. Daniel looked down at the floor for a moment. That must have been a dark time, he said. Lyra nodded slowly. My mother and I traveled for many years. We stayed hidden and moved often. But she always told me something important. Daniel looked up again. What did she say? Lyra lifted the broken toy starship and turned it in her hands. She said the galaxy forgot who we really are. Daniel smiled gently. And what are you, really? Lyra looked directly into his eyes. Guardians, she said simply. Daniel studied her glowing blue eyes carefully. There was no anger in them, no hatred, only quiet determination. Before he could say anything else, the adoption official suddenly returned to their corner. His face looked tense. Sir Daniel, he said carefully, I need to remind you that this situation is becoming complicated. Daniel glanced up. Complicated how? He asked. The official lowered his voice. Several council observers have noticed your conversation, he explained. They are concerned about the possibility of emotional activation. Daniel frowned slightly. What does that mean? The official hesitated. Strong emotions can trigger Ailari abilities, he said. And if that happens inside a crowded station... He did not finish the sentence. Daniel slowly looked back at Lyra. She was still sitting quietly beside him, still holding the broken toy starship, still looking more lonely than dangerous. Daniel turned back to the official. "You are worried about a child?" he said. The official replied carefully, "No, sir. We are worried about what she might become." Before Daniel could answer, a sudden low vibration passed through the entire station. The lights above the adoption hall flickered again, this time stronger. People looked around nervously. A warning alarm began to echo faintly somewhere in the distance. Lyra's glowing eyes suddenly lifted toward the ceiling. Daniel noticed something strange in her expression. She did not look scared. She looked focused, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. Then she whispered very quietly, "The storm is coming." The low vibration inside Orion's station grew stronger. At first, many people believed it was just another small system glitch. Large space stations often had minor technical problems, but within seconds, the vibration turned into a deep rumble that moved through the floor like distant thunder. Several lights flickered across the adoption hall. Families began looking around nervously. Then the calm station voice suddenly changed into an emergency announcement. "Warning! Warning! External energy disturbance detected." The message echoed through the giant hall. Conversation stopped instantly. A second announcement followed. "All non-essential visitors, please move toward evacuation corridors." Panic slowly began spreading across the adoption center. Parents grabbed their children. Officials rushed toward control consoles. Security drones floated down from the ceiling to guide people toward exits. Daniel stood up from the chair beside Lyra. "What is happening?" he asked the nearby adoption official. The official quickly checked his wrist display. His face turned pale. "That is not possible," he whispered. Daniel frowned. "What is it?" The official looked up slowly. "A massive energy storm just appeared near the station's orbit," he said. Daniel blinked in surprise. "A storm in space?" "Yes," the official replied. "Not a normal one. This looks like a cosmic energy wave." Daniel glanced toward Lyra. She was already standing beside the chair. Her glowing blue eyes were focused somewhere far beyond the station walls. "You can feel it," Daniel said quietly. Lyra nodded slowly. "It is very strong," she whispered. The official looked between them nervously. "How could you possibly know that?" he asked. Lyra did not answer immediately. Instead, she walked slowly toward the large observation window at the end of the hall. Daniel followed her. Outside the massive, transparent shield of the station, space usually looked calm and endless. But now, something terrifying was moving in the distance. A giant cloud of glowing blue and violet energy was twisting through space like a living storm. Lightning like waves rolled across its surface. Ships flying near the station suddenly changed course and rushed away from the growing disturbance. Daniel stared at the sight in disbelief. "That thing is huge," he said. The official checked his console again. "It is growing faster than expected," he replied nervously. "If it reaches the station, our shields may not hold." Across the hall, the evacuation alarm became louder. People were now rushing toward exit corridors. Security drones guided families toward emergency transport ships. Lyra stood quietly in front of the window. Her glowing eyes reflected the storm outside. Daniel noticed her expression looked strange again. Not fear, not panic, something else, something thoughtful. "You recognize it?" Daniel said slowly. Lyra nodded slightly. "Yes." Daniel stepped closer. "You said earlier your people could guide storms away from planets?" Lyra looked up at the massive swirling energy cloud again. "This storm feels similar to the ones my people studied long ago," she explained. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. "You mean the kind your species used to control?" Lyra lowered her gaze. "Yes," she said softly. Behind them, the station official suddenly spoke again. "You are not suggesting that a child could stop something like that," he said nervously. Lyra shook her head quickly. "No, but I might be able to guide it," she added quietly. Daniel looked surprised. "You can really do that?" Lyra hesitated. "I do not know," she admitted. "My mother began teaching me how to feel energy currents. But I never finished learning." Daniel crossed his arms thoughtfully. "But if no one does anything, that storm will destroy the station." The official interrupted quickly. "Sir, our defense systems are already preparing," he said. "We will try to push the storm away with shield bursts." Lyra slowly shook her head. "That will not work," she said softly. Both men looked at her. "Why not?" Daniel asked. Lyra pointed toward the observation window. "That storm is not just energy," she explained. "It is moving like something alive." The official stared at his console again. Sensors were now showing unstable patterns inside the storm cloud. "What she is saying might actually be correct," he muttered. Daniel looked back toward Lyra. "Can you help guide it away?" he asked. Lyra looked uncertain for the first time. "I might," she replied. "But there is a risk." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What kind of risk?" Lyra slowly turned toward him. "If I try to connect with the storm, it could overwhelm me," she explained. And if that happens... She paused for a moment. What? Daniel asked quietly. Lyra's glowing eyes looked slightly brighter now. The storm might come directly to me, she said. Daniel thought about that for a moment. Then he looked out at the giant, swirling energy cloud again. The storm was already moving closer. Ships were fleeing the station as fast as they could, and the emergency alarms continued echoing through the halls. Daniel finally spoke again. If you do nothing, thousands of people could die, he said. Lyra nodded slowly. I know. Daniel knelt down so he was at the same level as her glowing eyes. You said earlier your people were guardians, he reminded her. Lyra looked at the broken toy starship still sitting on the empty chair behind them. Then she looked back at the storm outside. Her small hands slowly closed into determined fists. I will try, she said quietly. At that exact moment, the station lights flickered again, and the giant storm outside suddenly changed direction. It was no longer drifting past the station. It was now moving straight toward it. The storm outside Orion Station grew larger with every passing second. From the observation window, it looked like a giant ocean wave made of glowing lightning. Blue and violet energy twisted together like moving clouds. Every few moments, a powerful flash of light rolled across its surface. Inside the station, the emergency alarms continued echoing through the corridors. Evacuation ships were launching as fast as possible, but many people were still trapped inside the giant station. Daniel stood beside Lyra near the window. Both of them watched the storm getting closer. The station official behind them spoke into his communicator. Command center, shields are not going to hold if the storm reaches the hull, he said urgently. Static answered back. Then a worried voice replied, We know. We are trying to redirect it with defense bursts. Lyra slowly shook her head again. That will only make the storm stronger, she whispered. Daniel looked at her carefully. You are sure? He asked. Lyra nodded. The storm feeds on chaotic energy, she explained. Every blast will give it more power. The official overheard her and looked frustrated. You are a child, he said nervously. How can you possibly know more than the station's scientists? Lyra did not argue. She simply looked at the approaching storm again. My people listened to energy for thousands of years, she replied softly. We learned how it moves. Daniel could see the storm was now much closer to the station. Massive waves of light rolled across space like thunderclouds. Even the thick shield around the observation window began to vibrate slightly. What do you need to do? Daniel asked. Lyra took a slow breath. I need to reach the station's outer energy network, she said. Daniel frowned slightly. You mean the shield generators? Yes, Lyra replied. If I connect to the station's energy grid, I might be able to guide the storm away from us. The official's eyes widened. That is impossible, he said immediately. No outsider is allowed to connect to the station's core systems. Daniel crossed his arms. Well, something needs to happen quickly, he said. Because at that exact moment, the entire station shook violently. A loud explosion echoed somewhere in the distance. The emergency lights switched to deep red. Another announcement filled the halls. Warning! External energy impact detected. The storm had reached the station's outer defense field. Outside the window, giant waves of glowing energy crashed against the invisible shield barrier. Every impact sent bright flashes across the dark surface of space. Daniel turned toward the official again. Where is the nearest shield control node? He asked. The official hesitated. That information is restricted. Daniel's voice became firmer. People are about to die, he said. The official looked around the nearly empty adoption hall. Most families had already evacuated. Only a few workers and security drones remained. Finally, the official sighed. There is a maintenance access room 2 levels below us, he admitted. It connects to one of the shield grid relays. Daniel looked at Lyra. Will that help? Lyra nodded slowly. It might be enough, she said. Without another word, Daniel began walking toward the nearest corridor. Lyra followed him quickly. Behind them, the station official rushed to keep up. You're both completely insane, he muttered nervously. They reached a small elevator near the emergency stairwell. The power inside the station flickered again as the elevator moved downward. The rumbling from outside became louder. It sounded like thunder rolling through metal walls. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into a narrow maintenance corridor, filled with cables and control panels. At the end of the corridor was a large, glowing terminal connected to the shield network. Lyra walked slowly toward it. Her glowing blue eyes reflected the bright energy displays on the wall. Daniel stood nearby, watching carefully. What happens now? He asked quietly. Lyra placed one small hand near the glowing control panel. My people do not control energy with machines, she explained. We feel it and guide it. Daniel nodded. And the station system will let you do that. Lyra looked uncertain. It might, she said softly, but the storm is very strong. The official stepped back nervously. Perhaps we should reconsider this plan, he suggested quickly. But it was already too late. The entire corridor suddenly shook as another massive wave of energy hit the station shield. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Lyra closed her glowing eyes slowly, then she placed both hands gently on the shield control terminal. For a moment, nothing happened. Daniel watched carefully, then the lights around the control panel began glowing brighter. Thin lines of blue energy slowly moved across the metal surface like flowing water. The station official stared in disbelief. "That should not be possible," he whispered. Lyra's breathing became slower and deeper. Her silver skin began reflecting faint waves of light. Daniel could feel a strange vibration moving through the room, almost like the station itself was listening to her. Outside, the storm continued crashing against the station shield, but suddenly, something changed. One section of the swirling energy cloud began moving differently. Instead of striking the shield directly, it curved slightly away from the station. The official looked at the external sensors on his console. "Incredible," he murmured. "The storm's direction is changing." Daniel looked back at Lyra. She was still standing at the terminal with her eyes closed, but now the glowing blue light around her had grown stronger, stronger than anyone had expected. And deep inside the storm outside, something powerful had finally noticed her. The maintenance corridor was filled with a strange blue glow. Energy flowed across the shield terminal like living light. Thin waves of power moved from the machine into Lyra's hands. And back again, Daniel stood only a few steps away, watching carefully. The station official stared at his sensor console in complete disbelief. "This cannot be real," he whispered. But the readings on the screen were clear. The massive storm outside Orion Station was beginning to change direction. Large sections of the glowing cloud slowly curved away from the station's shield. Instead of crashing directly into the barrier, the storm was bending around it, like a river flowing around a rock. Inside the corridor, Lyra kept her eyes closed. Her small hands rested gently on the glowing control panel. Her silver skin now reflected soft waves of blue light. Daniel noticed that her breathing had become slower, almost perfectly calm, but the glowing energy around her continued growing stronger. "Lyra?" Daniel said quietly. "Are you okay?" For a moment she did not answer. Then her voice came softly. "I can feel the storm," she said. Daniel frowned slightly. "What does it feel like?" Lyra paused before answering. "Like a lost animal," she explained. "It is confused and in pain." The station official looked up sharply. "In pain?" he repeated. Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes. The energy inside it is broken and unstable." Daniel crossed his arms thoughtfully. "So the storm is not trying to destroy the station," he said. Lyra opened her glowing eyes slowly. "No," she replied. "It is just searching for balance." Outside the station, the giant cloud of energy continued moving across space. Sensors now showed that more than half of the storm had already shifted away from the station's orbit. Evacuation ships hovering nearby suddenly stopped retreating. Several pilots began reporting the same message. "The storm is moving away." Back in the maintenance corridor, the official stared at the sensor display. "Incredible," he said quietly. "No defense system in the galaxy could have done this." Daniel smiled slightly. "Maybe the galaxy forgot who the real Guardians were," he replied. Lyra's glowing eyes flickered for a moment, but then the storm suddenly surged again. A powerful wave of energy rushed toward the station. The entire corridor shook violently. Warning lights flashed across every wall. Daniel grabbed the nearby railing to stay balanced. "What happened?" he asked. The official looked at his console again. "There is still a large unstable core inside the storm," he explained. "If it collapses suddenly, the shockwave could still destroy the station." Daniel looked toward Lyra quickly. "Can you guide that part too?" he asked. Lyra focused again on the glowing control terminal. "I will try," she said quietly. Her hands pressed slightly harder against the energy panel. The blue glow around her became brighter. This time, the energy flowing through the corridor felt stronger, like a silent wind moving through the air. Outside the storm's unstable core slowly began changing direction. Instead of collapsing near the station, it started drifting toward open space, far away from any planets or ships. For several long seconds, everyone waited. Finally, the storm's glowing center faded slowly into the darkness of deep space. The violent energy waves disappeared one by one, until the stars outside Orion Station were calm again. The alarms inside the station suddenly stopped. The emergency lights returned to normal. Silence filled the corridor. Lyra slowly lifted her hands away from the control panel. The glowing energy around her faded gently. Daniel stepped forward quickly. "Lyra," he said. She looked a little tired, but she was smiling slightly. "The storm is gone," she said softly. The station official checked the final sensor readings. He shook his head slowly. "You just saved 40,000 lives," he said. Daniel laughed quietly. "Not bad for someone with 1,000 rejections," he replied. Later that day, the adoption hall reopened. Families slowly returned after the emergency ended, but something had changed. The glowing board above the quiet corner now showed a different number. The old rejection count had been removed. In its place, the system displayed a new message: adoption confirmed. Born, Lyra stood beside Daniel near the chair where she once sat alone. Several families looked at her with new respect. Some even smiled, but Lyra stayed close to Daniel. She looked up at him curiously. "Why did you trust me when everyone else was afraid?" she asked. Daniel thought about the question for a moment. Then he gently picked up the broken toy starship from the chair and handed it back to her. "Because even broken ships can still fly," he said. Lyra looked down at the toy in her hands. Then she looked up at the glowing stars outside the station window. For the first time in a very long time, she was not alone. She had something the galaxy once refused to give her, a home and a family.